Hello, everyone. This is Digital Imaging Online, and I'm Lisa Gabrielle. And today I'd like to discuss with you your final project in the class, which is Project 3, and your final book lessons in the textbook, Adobe Photoshop Classroom in a Book. So let's go ahead and jump into the first the project. Okay. Um, and I've been following the schedule pretty religiously. I hate to refer to specific weeks or the schedules in here because I try to use these videos for um, 8-week and 14-week classes, but basically all the classes will end up at this level where they'll be working on the final project. So according to your calendar, which I have here, um, your last project in here is Project 3, which I'm going to review with you today, as well as your final technology assignment or book lessons are Chapter 7 and 8. Okay. All right. So let's jump into the project here. So Project 3. This is a fun project, and lots of students enjoy this project, and it also explores a lot of different tools that you haven't used yet. Some tools you have used, so you'll be able to bring some knowledge to the table as well as learn something new. Um, and the way this project works is you have some choices about, theme and the type of board that you're going to design. But basically, what you're doing for this project is you're designing boards. And I have a diagram here of the board choices that you have. You can either design a surfboard, a skateboard, or a snowboard for this project. Okay, and these are the three shapes listed here. Going back to the actual project handout here. So I'm going to just review with you the specifics about this project. So reading off the handout here, you have three choices as I showed you there, the surfboard, the skateboard, or the snowboard. Using Photoshop, so we'll be using Photoshop exclusively for this project. You're going to design a board design based on a chosen theme. So the theme itself is your choice. And as you start doing research about board designs, you're going to find that certain topics and themes are best for certain types of board designs. And you may find that you might want to follow suit and do something that has been done in terms of theme, or you may want to come up with something absolutely brand new, and that's fine too. One of the things that makes this project different from the other two projects is this project is more of a commercial project. And what I mean by that is this is a product. Your board designs will eventually sell a particular product, a surfboard, a skateboard, or a snowboard. So, because of the fact that it is a product and it is a commercial project, there is an element of research that is involved in doing this project that you may not have had in the other two projects for this class. So, we're going to discuss that here in a moment. But using a combination of images and vector-based graphics, typography, artwork, or textures, I'd like for you to design a series of board designs. You will complete at least 3 designs for this series. Okay. One of the designs will be based on images. So you've worked with images on the first project as well as the second project. So at this point, you should be pretty comfortable with images. The second board design will be designed using vector graphics, and one of the 2 chapters you're going to complete this week is dealing with creating vector graphics in Photoshop. And your third board design will be based on typography. And again, the other chapter you'll be completing this week talks about type design and typography in Photoshop. So you'll be dealing with those 3 different areas while designing these board designs. Okay. What I ask you to do is to create all your own original artwork for this. So I I encourage you to steer away from any pre-existing clip art or artwork that has been created by someone else. I'd like this to be a complete original execution on your part. I realize you may borrow images. Of course, you want to keep track of your sources. But in terms of the vector graphics and the typography, that should be original. Okay. You'll also have a chance before the end of class to use a drawing tablet. So you might find a drawing tablet is useful for this project as well. So you're going to choose choice one, two, or three, whichever board design you would like to design. And then the criteria applies to all. So everybody has to complete the board design series guidelines. And as we've been working through this class, we've each week had progress reports that we put together for our projects. So your first progress report, which you'll find that in week, well, I'm not going to reference the week, in the next week after this week, you'll find a write-up on what is expected of you for that first progress report. And generally, you're going to be answering a series of questions as stated here in number one. So you'll begin your study doing some research on the latest trends in board design. Go to the library, go to the local bookstore, go to a board store if there's one here locally. Check out magazines, look on the internet, do as much possible research as you can on what goes into board design. What is a board design? What are trends in board design and such? So you're going to answer a series of questions, and I have the questions listed here, looking at latest designs in the board of your choice, what makes them unique, looking at companies who manufacture board designs and how are they different or similar, who is your audience for your particular board design, and it really does make a difference in terms of who you're trying to sell the product to. What are the demographics of that particular audience? And what is the theme you're going to go with? So, based on answering these questions, you should have, after completing the research, a good idea of what you plan to do for your board designs. So then the second part of the progress report will be producing sketch work. And again, you might also find at this point, since you'll be introduced to the drawing tablet, that the tablet is really handy for creating sketches, and you might use the tablet for sketches. You might just sketch with a pencil in your sketchbook and scan them in, or photograph them and post them, however you choose to do your sketch work. But I'm looking for at least 5 sketches of possible design ideas. So remember as you're sketching that this is a series. So even though you're doing 3 different kinds of board designs, one based on images, one based on vector graphics, and one based on typography, all 3 board designs still need to look like they go together as a series. Okay. Um, think about things like color, like what colors would work for your particular theme. What type of forms are you going to use? Images in terms of photos. Are you using photos? Are you going to draw artwork? Are you doing illustration? What letter forms will you be using? What do the boards say? What will you need to say? What typeface will you be using? So all of those things will be things you'll examine during the sketch process. Uh, in terms of design, you only have to design the fronts of the boards. If you prefer to do front and back, you can get extra credit for doing the backs of the board designs. I think on some, there actually is a design that usually goes, I think on skateboards, a lot of times they have a back panel of design work. Not all the time, but sometimes. And I think also on snowboards. But again, as you do your research, you're going to find these things out. And then there I have listed what the final submission is for this project. And this project is going to be your final project in the class. So you'll be turning all this work in, your final PDF, your final process report, as well as your final Photoshop document during finals week at the end of this class, which I believe is, depending on what you're taking, an 8-week or a 14-week, it's in a couple of weeks. So your rubric is listed there in terms of how the points are broken down. And then you have these handy little shapes, of which I will be talking more about how to use these shapes to actually get started with your board designs. But first, let's do our research. Let's figure out our theme. Let's kind of get familiar with the subject of board design. In addition, I mentioned that you had 2 chapters left for the class to complete in your textbook. The first one is your chapter on typography or typographic design, and it states here that this should take you about an hour. You'll be creating this piece here. It's kind of like a cover design, and it covers a lot of the interesting effects that you can use to create typography. Putting texture inside type, shaping type on a path, uh, changing type style, using type fonts. It talks about all of those different kinds of things, adjusting type paragraphs and such. So this chapter should be handy and useful for you while you're designing your board designs, because you will be making one board design that is all typographic. So this chapter's due this week, as well as the other chapter that you'll be working on, and the very final chapter is your vector drawing techniques chapter. Okay. Now, if you're wondering, well, what's vector drawing and why is it different than what I'm doing here in Photoshop? I believe there's a section in your book. I'm not necessarily sure if it's on this. Yeah, right here. It gives you on the first page. It gives you a explanation between the difference between explains the difference between bitmap images and vector graphics. And up till now in this class, in using Photoshop, you've been creating and working with bitmap graphics, because all the graphics that you've been using so far has been photographs and artworks that are made out of pixels. Well, you're also able to make graphics in Photoshop that are made out of points and lines, and processed by the computer based on math equations. And you are able to create those kinds of graphics right here in Photoshop as well. And it talks about the differences between the two. So I highly recommend you take a look at this page, because I think some of this information is eventually on your quiz at the end of the term. Okay. So the other thing you'll be doing is creating this cool little spaceship. And let me just jump back to the beginning here on this. I guess I have to go back to the pages here. You'll be creating this piece, and notice here that you have these shapes back here that are sort of flat, and they have some opacity to them so you can see through them. But those are all vector graphics, and those are what you'll be using on one of your board designs. One of your board designs will need to be designed using vector graphics, and you can use some photography, but your vector graphics needs to be the prominent design within that board, and the photography could be a supporting portion of the design. So you'll be reading about vector graphics, and you'll learn how to actually use the tools in Photoshop in this chapter. So those are your last 2 chapters. I also have some examples of previous student works on this project. So let's jump into here to eCampus, and let's take a look at um, disregard the week that I'm working in. Again, if you're in an 8-week class, you'll be working in another week, but or if you're in a 14-week class, materials are basically the same. Okay, so as you scroll down here in this week on board designs, you'll see that I've posted some examples of previous student works that were, I thought, well done for this project. And using a lot of the things I mentioned in your design write-up, these students were able to execute a series of board designs. So for instance, up here, this one here, this very first example, the New York City, her theme was, she was from New York City. She was here in Dallas, and she wanted to do a set of a skateboard theme on the city. So she did these kind of cool series. One being typographic, so the whole cityscape is all made out of text here. and one being type dominant in that this is kind of the image work is set as a background and the quote in the middle. If you can't make it here, you won't make it anywhere. We've all heard that about New York City. And then the type dominant one here. And she used some interesting effects, and I think overall she did a pretty decent job. I like the texture, the wood texture back here. The other thing that she did that was really nice was she created a mark design for her boards, which was a nice touch. It's not required, but a lot of students develop a kind of a brand for their board during the course of this project, and then they use it on their board, and it's kind of nice. So she's got this here, and you can kind of see it shows up on all her board designs here. This person as well, here's another piece. These two are a great example of vector graphics being rendered here in Photoshop. So you can kind of see how all of this is kind of flat and it's very nice and smooth. Well, those are all vector graphics that were created in Photoshop. And then in the center, he has his, I believe he also created a brand, or this might be his personal watermark that he's put in here because on your last project you designed a personal watermark, so you can reuse that here, or you can come up with a new one for your board design company. Again, here's another two that I thought were really handled quite well, using texture, using vector graphics. Now here's a series that was quite experimental. I think the student actually used the tablet and created some of this artwork here. And she also utilized some interesting textures, and then she kind of integrated in some type into her texture, which I thought was a nice way to work in her type solution. So overall, a nice series here as well. Here's another one that was done by a student. This was in an online class. I think it was last spring. This student did this piece, and I thought this was really handled well. This is her typographic. Her image dominant um, is here. And then she's got, well, actually, this might be vector graphics. It's hard to tell between these two which one's actually image dominant, which one's vector graphics. But it looks like this might be more image dominant because there's really a lot of collaged overlaying images here. So I would say this is probably image dominant, and this is made from vector graphics. She's got this outline around the lips. She's got some interesting textures in the back. She's also got some morph text that she's played around with in vector. So again, another nice series. And again, keep in mind that you could see the continuity in design across this series, even though all these boards look different, they look like they go together as a series. Again, here's another simpler rendition of a skateboard, but and a really nice, clean design. I could tell right away that this is vector graphics here. This is typographic, and then this is image dominant. Even if it's just a simple piece of art. But think about what that art would be, how it's placed on the board, the types of colors you choose. All of that's important. Here's another series where this student really did a great job, I think, working with typography. She had this kind of cyber kittens was her theme, and she kind of made this mark here, which she didn't it didn't show up on any other boards, but I kind of like. She made this little mark. It was like a figure morphing into a cat kind of thing. Cyborg kittens. This is her image dominant. This would be her vector graphics, it looks like, and then this would be her type dominant. So I thought these were some good examples. This is a snowboard series. This is a skateboard series, another skateboard, and then a surfboard series. So you can kind of see how you can make this a very interesting project. You have a lot of potential to make your own decisions in terms of theme, the type of board you use, the kinds of graphics that you apply. But again, try and keep it as original as you possibly can. And hopefully you'll end up with something as successful as these examples here. Okay, that concludes my discussion on your final project.